Hello and welcome to the Dynamic Leaders Podcast, part of the Talent 409 Leadership Academy Network. I am your host, Colin Cernelia, and thank you so much for joining us today. Please head over to talent409.com to learn more about how we can help your team or organization with their leadership and culture development. This podcast is available on Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, and wherever else you listen to your favorite podcast. Plus, don't forget, you can now play this podcast on any Amazon-enabled device. Just ask, Alexa, play the Dynamic Leaders Podcast.
Getting Dynamic Leaders with Colin Cernelia from Apple Podcasts.
Before this episode begins, please consider taking a minute and leave a rating and review. Doing this really does help us grow the show, and you can get featured for your review on a future episode. And we are on to episode 118 of the Dynamic Leaders Podcast. Today, my guest is Bridget Orchard. Bridget is the head softball coach at Villanova University. Prior to taking over for the Wildcats, Bridget spent 17 seasons at Fordham University, this all coming after her own successful playing career at Villanova. A few of the topics we get into in today's conversation include the increased knowledge level of student athletes and how that affects her recruiting and relationship building, the evolution of a young coach and what goes into the learning process, why it's important to not get too high or too low with your emotions, what it means to treat people differently but also treat them fairly, and how to connect with the team individually but also in a wider team setting. Throughout this conversation, you will hear Bridget be so passionate about softball. It's no wonder that she looks to recruit the same type of kids to her program, ones that are super passionate about softball. And you'll also hear Bridget talk about how it's important for her to be a visible female role model for the younger generation. I love this conversation, and I especially love what I mentioned earlier, the portion of our conversation that focuses on how to treat people differently, but also treat them fairly. And we talk a little bit about her perspective, and then I throw in my own spin, connecting her words to the story of Joe Torre in the way that he also went about that same type of philosophy, which I write about in my book, Culture of Excellence, What the Yankees Can Teach Us About Leadership. And that book is going to be available for purchase starting tomorrow. So it was an easy segue to get a nice little quick book plug in before this conversation with Bridget, but it's also a great highlight to mention because it's a style and it's a philosophy that great visible leaders like Joe Torre and like Bridget use in their coaching philosophy. So let's not waste any more time and let's dive right into the conversation and let's discover our talent altitude. Here is my talk with Bridget Orchard. Okay, everyone, welcome back to the Dynamic Leaders Podcast. Today, my guest with me is Bridget Orchard. Bridget, thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to get to talk to you about your athletic career and now your coaching career. They've both been pretty amazing, and I'm sure we have lots to get to. But before I spoil your whole introduction for you here, I want to give you an opportunity for you to tell the listening audience a little bit about yourself. So please tell us, who are you?
Well, like you mentioned, I'm Bridget Orchard. I'm the head softball coach currently at Villanova University. I also played here collegiately softball at Villanova. So it's pretty cool that I'm able to come back to my alma mater. But between me playing and coaching, I was coaching at Cabrini College, which is just right across the street here from Villanova. So I'm familiar with this area. And then I spent the last 17 years at Fordham University, which is in Atlantic 10 in the Bronx up in New York City. So I've been around a little bit, but I'm loving every minute of it.
So cool, and it seems like softball is kind of at the center of your world, both when you were younger and now in your adult life. Was softball like always the thing for you? Did you know that you wanted to play softball as long as you could and you wanted a career in softball after that?
Yeah, well, I didn't know I wanted a career in it. I knew I loved playing it. I always thought it was just a game. I didn't realize till after I really couldn't get a job that I realized I can make a career of it. So it's been pretty cool to kind of see my path. My brother was in basketball. He played basketball at Fordham, and he's 2 years ahead of me. So I kind of followed him. So I played a lot of sports growing up. Back then, it's when you used to play different sports. Every season was a new sport. So I swam, played soccer, softball, basketball. I kind of did a little bit of everything, but softball was kind of like my true love, something that I think I was better at than everything else. But it wasn't until pretty much, probably high school where I focused, just on softball predominantly. Like in the summer, I did mostly softball over all the other sports, and able to do that with the friends, the teammates that I had. It just made me love the game, and then obviously gave me the opportunity to play at Villanova. Grew my love and passion for the sport. And then after that, when I was in school, I was majoring in communications, and I thought I wanted to go to law school. Like I had so many different ideas of what to do as a job. I didn't realize that coaching was a job. So it took me till after I graduated to realize that I can make a career of it.
I think there's a lot of people that, whether they listen to this podcast or listen to other podcasts, they're in that high school time of their life and trying to make that decision, whether they've already started to specialize or they just know that they can play whatever game they're playing at the next level. And I'm always curious as to how people make that determination and then how they put that work in to get there, because you played Division I softball, so you're at the highest level. How do you get from the point where you say like, hey, I'm going to specialize in softball when I get into high school, to the point where, hey, I can actually play here. Schools are coming to look at me. I'm getting offers. Like, how do you make that all work?
It's just funny because nowadays it's so different from obviously when I played back in the 90s, but we played, it really was just for fun and we enjoyed it. And we did the same thing with travel ball. We traveled to nationals and we worked out, but it really wasn't about being recruited. And I think like nowadays, people get into it thinking, when my kids are 10, 11 years old, it's like how I get recruited and what teams to play on. And back then we played more, it was fun. We wanted to get after it and want to do it. And then probably towards my junior year, even as late as my junior year, realized like, hey, we can go to college and I do have scholarships for this. We're going to focus in on this. So I think we were luckier back in the day to be able to enjoy it more. And I just loved hanging out with my teammates and traveling and having so much fun with it. And it was kind of a bonus. Hey, we get to go to college and play this as well. So I definitely think that it kind of fell upon us. And I always tell our girls too, I think that softball, I'm not as good as they are right now. Like the level of play today is unbelievable, and I think it probably is due to kind of some of the specializations and what they do. But no way could I play today.
Fair enough. I feel the same way about baseball when I was playing. They're just so far ahead. I feel like not only in athleticism and the way they can play the game, but just their knowledge and everything, like whether it's baseball or softball related or just anything related to school or the outside world. Like I feel like the knowledge level is just so much more increased these days.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's so many good things. Like I said, there's some negatives, but I think, like you said, the positive, just like the strength coaches. My brother does that now for a living. He just trains people. And back then we didn't have somebody just to train us in conditioning and lifting and running. So that aspect of it, they're so much stronger. And then they also have their coach that coaches them. Then they have their hitting coach and their pitching coach and their parents. And they just have so much, like I said, knowledge out there to get them better, and just training, even facilities. Now there's indoor facilities. I'm from upstate New York, so we didn't play all year round. We just couldn't. And nowadays, it doesn't matter if you're from PA or New York or even Maine, like you could play all year round. They're traveling down south in, January. So it's pretty cool, the opportunities that they're getting, which is really awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, back to your career specifically, you have a pretty successful one at Villanova before you venture off into the real world. And I heard you say that you didn't realize coaching was even an option for you to do. But again, very curious as to people's transitions almost immediately after that collegiate career ends, because a lot of us go through these uncertainties and these identity crises. Like we've been playing, especially like a softball, baseball thing, like you've probably been playing since you were 5 years old. Some of the other sports you don't start till a little bit older, but that's a long time to be doing one thing and to have your identity kind of wrapped up into it. So how did you approach just that initial, like right after you were going to graduate college? What was that phase like for you?
Yeah, it was really quick, and I was really blessed. And I always say that I was just lucky. It's kind of the right time in the right place. Like I said, in college, I was actually studying for quote real job. I took the LSATs. I thought I was going to go to law school. At one point, I was just communications. I wanted to do like marketing, advertising. I had so many different interests that I wanted to do for the real world. And then upon graduating, I ended up getting a postgraduate scholarship to Temple University to get my master's in sports administration. And so I took advantage of that and was like, all right, I'm going to do this. I get to go to school for 2 years for free. So I'm thinking I'll just extend this as long as I can because I really didn't want to leave school. And then I worked in the athletic department at Villanova, and the opportunity came up. They needed a coach, a softball coach at Cabrini College. And my coach at the time, Bridget Orchard, suggested to go over there and interview. And I'm thinking, I play softball. I don't coach it. I don't know how to coach it, but whatever. I do need a job. I'll go interview for it. So I went over for an interview one day, and I ended up getting offered the job. I remember talking to my parents and thinking, like, do I even take this? I don't know if I even know how to coach. So I really went into it blind. I took the job, and my career kind of skyrocketed from there. And I always give credit to the players that I had when I first took the Cabrini job. Like, they're the reason that I'm coaching today. And I talked to them. They're still like my best friends to this day, which is funny. We went to dinner that night with a lot of them. And it's just funny because I always talk about if they weren't as great people and I'd have a great relationship with them, I might have not have stayed in coaching. I could have taken, did that for a couple of years and then went and pursued a different avenue. But because of them, they kind of brought that love of the game, the love of coaching, the love of getting after it, that I continued on. And I ended up leaving there after 4 years and taking the Division I job at Fordham. And then the rest is history.
So what else goes into the evolution of a young coach, somebody who's not 100% positive that they're even cut out to do the job? How do you get from that point to where you are now? But those early years, like, what are some of the things that you're trying to focus on to get better and improve on?
A lot of mistakes. I always say that. I've never been an assistant coach, so it's kind of an interesting path. I've always been a head coach, and I've learned kind of by the seat of my pants, and I've learned so much from my players, and I think that kind of molded me to kind of my philosophies, and the cultures that I create came from my experiences, obviously. And I think that, like I said, I made a lot of mistakes, and I had such the opportunity to kind of step right in, Division III program, get after it. And, we did so many fun things. It was, like I said, it didn't seem like work. It didn't seem like a job. And so the girls, like I said before, they were just great. The relationships we formed, the fun we had together, the wins, the losses, the ups and downs. And I started to realize that that's the stuff that I love. I love the competitiveness. I love getting out there and competing. And I love it at every level. And it was great. And there was no difference from my Division III experience to my Division I experience as far as the competitiveness. Like, we were trying to win national championship in Division III. We made it to the NCAAs 3 times and fell short in the regionals. It's probably still one of the toughest losses of my coaching career was my final year at Cabrini. We had to get beat twice to go to the World Series, and we got beat twice. So it was still crushing. We still talk about it to this day. But again, that was probably over 20 years ago. And then at the Division I level, same thing. We just different little differences here and there as far as like the traveling and the amount of games you play. But as far as the competitiveness of the girls and the work ethic and the life lessons and just the things off the field that are so cool about coaching, which is why I'm like, I don't feel like coaching is a job because it's so much fun and it's so different every year. So I just really feel lucky and blessed that I found this, coaching, and that I'm allowed to do it.
So you mentioned that you made quite a few mistakes, and generally I try to stay pretty positive on this podcast, but I also do really feel very powerfully that you can learn a lot from your mistakes. And I'd love for you to be able to maybe offer up some of those to young coaches out there who are listening. Maybe they can avoid these mistakes if there's something that's an easy fix or just something that maybe you overlooked.
Yeah, some of the stuff, the growing pains are just, I think when I was younger, I took everything. And again, I didn't have a family at the time either. So it was just different. I think it is for young coaches. But I took everything so seriously, like the wins I took, I was super excited, was really, really high on the wins, and the losses, I was really, really low on the losses. So I always tell people, like, just try to don't get too high, don't get too low, and kind of experience both. And I kind of could talk a little about that when we started winning some championships. Like, the first one we won, I was like out in the field celebrating, throwing up. We were throwing our stuff all over the place, and we were so excited. And then, by my third or fourth one, I kind of watched them celebrate, and I got more joy out of watching the girls celebrate than I celebrated myself. And I think that was just kind of, again, experience and being there and doing that. But it really was cool to kind of watch the girls experience the win and the championship, as opposed to when I first started coaching. Like, I took that so personally. So that was one of the things that I thought was kind of cool. I don't know if that's a mistake, but it's just something I learned along the way. It's just, it's a long season, kind of, stay even and don't get too high and don't get too low. And just kind of, again, working with players and developing relationships. I think those are one of the things too that you learn over time how to do that, and that every kid is different. And I think when I first started coaching, you try to treat everybody the same, like, oh, you need to treat them the same. But I don't really believe that. I think that everybody's different and everybody needs to be treated fairly. Everybody needs to be fairly is not necessarily the same. So I think that's one of the things I've been trying to do as I go into my coaching. I still feel like, even to this day, after all these years of coaching, I still feel I learn more from the players than they learn from me. Like, everyone that comes in brings a different experience and a different past, and it's just kind of cool to pick their brain. I always say I'm kind of a player's coach. I want to hear what they have to say, and I'm big on getting their opinions and what they think and what they want to do. And I think that started, again, just from me starting out, being a head coach right out of the gate, never been an assistant. I've always leaned on my players to teach me, so I think that's pretty cool.
I want to try to focus on the treat them different but treat them fairly quote that you just said, because it reminds me of, and I'm sure you're at least aware of him in your time in the Bronx, Joe Torre, who was the manager of the Yankees, almost said literally that same thing before, that you treat people differently but you give them all the fair shot. And it kind of seems counterintuitive, like when you say it out loud. It's like, well, how do you treat people differently but treat them fairly? But I totally get what he meant from reading it in the context of what he was talking about. But I'd love to hear from your perspective about like how you approach that with the different girls on your team and different situations that come from that.
And I think it's just getting to know them. The first thing you got to do in coaching is get to know them as a person first. Like, not worry about, obviously they're all talented, they're all there, they all have skills. The next step, dive into when we get our girls on campus, and obviously recruiting, you get to know them pretty good too, which is nice. We have the recruiting phase where we get to know them, learn more about them. And then obviously they come to campus and we get to know them as a player. But I think getting to know them individually, that's how you kind of know what makes them tick, because it's different for everybody. So it could be something as easy as who you're really going to get on, you're really going to yell at, and who you can't do that to, because some of them just crumble. Some of them really need to be criticized one-on-one. They don't like it, when you do that in front of everybody. Nobody likes to be criticized, but at the same time, there's some people that can take it, some people that can't, and how to push certain buttons. There's some players that I've had, you almost had to. They needed you to yell at them. They were like, hey, yell at me. This is what I do. This is going to push me. And then some of the players, like, don't do that. I'll crumble. I'll get into a shell, and I don't like to be yelled at. And that's just kind of getting to know what makes them tick. Because the kids that want you to get on them, you need to be there for them too. You need to be able to do that for them. And some of these kids, they need that motivation. They need somebody to be on and make sure that they're being held accountable and making sure they're doing everything to do, getting the reps they need to get in. And you're watching them. And we kind of know which kids we can rely on in certain things and which kids we really need to get on them about.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point to the whole treat them differently but treat them fairly. Is it's really like the whole learning context of everything, right? Like, each individual is going to learn in a different way, and each individual is going to respond to feedback and to criticism in a different way. So I love that point, and I'd like to be able to try to connect this to the larger team aspect of everything, and how, I guess, from a outside perspective, you would love to be able to have that individualized time with your players all the time, but NCAA restrictions, and I'm sure you're well versed in this more than I am, but kind of limit the time that you have with a team. And I'd imagine that your interactions with them are more on a large team basis than they are on an individual team basis. So how do you go about that philosophy and still be able to be effective in a full team setting like that?
Yeah, no, that's an awesome question. That's I think the biggest challenge, like you said, getting to know everybody one-on-one, but yet you don't have the time, you don't get to see them that much, and a lot of times you're together as a team. So we do spend a lot of time on the team building stuff, and I'm not real big on someone like the team building where you make them do this and make them do this, and some of the cornier, I guess, kind of team builders.
Right.
So we won't do a lot of like, hey, you need to write this about this person. I think that's like forced fun, and I'm like, we're not going to do forced fun. So our team builders are stuff that we try to get together and just do things as a team outside of softball. So one of, and it counts towards our hours, it does, but this year we're going to do goat yoga. So it's like, hey, let's go out and do something fun. We're going to go bowling was a big thing. I know my first year at Villanova was a big thing for us. We went out bowling just for something fun to do. And we really learned, believe it or not, a lot about each of them. I was on this path with them where they didn't have a lot of fire. They didn't really have a passion. Do you guys get excited? Like, what's going on? I didn't think they really liked playing. I didn't think they knew how to compete. And we got to the bowling alley, and holy cow, like they were so competitive. They were throwing strikes, and people were jumping up and down. They were crossing their arms. We still look to this day. We're like making X with our arms, and they were like going, like, wow, like a bell. And I'm like, they do have competitiveness, and they do have passion. So now it's my job as a coach to how do I get them to do that on the softball field, because they are competitive and they want to win and they want to get after it. So it was some of those things that you learn off the field that kind of you can translate onto the field. And I think kind of getting to know, if they get to know each other, like you said, it's hard for me as one person. I lean on my assistants a ton as well. And they're younger. They both of my assistants played for me at different times. So I'm really big into loyalty, and I'm big into them getting to know me. So obviously they played for me. They know what we're expecting. So they're big on kind of getting to know each player themselves as well. And it's definitely been helping as I get older and students still stay the same age. It gets a little bit harder for me because you try to connect with them one-on-one and you have no idea what they're talking about. I was like, what? What is that? What is TikTok? Like, I don't know what that is. I'm like, man, I'm losing my touch. So that's where I rely a lot on my assistants. They're younger. They've been there, done that. Because even like things when I first started coaching, that's why my friends are, still my friends from my career days. I was the same age as them. I'm 21. They're, 18, 19. So we connected very easily. As I got older, it was a little bit harder because I wasn't on the same page with them on a lot of different things. So I think that's where I use my assistants a lot more to kind of keep me in touch with what's going on and what does this mean? What's this person doing? And even, like I said, with the age of internet and cell phones, social media, like that all came about as I was getting into my coaching career, and it was crazy. Like they were posting things and we're like, no, you can't do that. And you've never been through it. So I haven't, as a player, never had all my stats posted online, and now you're like, wow, this pressure. They're having to see this stuff online. No wonder they care a lot about their stats. Like when we played, nobody really knew your stats. So I think there's a lot more pressures on today's athletes for sure, for a lot of reasons. But I think one of the biggest ones obviously is the stuff we didn't have with the social media that they have now. So it's kind of getting to know them and having them feel comfortable responding. So a lot of me kind of knowing them is letting them feel comfortable, come talk to me. So I always encourage them, like I said, outside of softball, like come in, talk to me. I want them to feel comfortable to kind of tell me anything and everything that's going on. And because I've been coaching so long, there really isn't anything I haven't heard, good, the bad, the ugly. So I'm kind of ready for it all.
What you just walked us through, I think, beautifully illustrates how important it is to get outside of the softball bubble or whatever bubble you're in for the sport that you're playing. And I was speaking with Mary Wise, who's the volleyball coach down at Florida rather recently, and she talked about how she had some type of lunch meeting with her athletic director, and it was like literally they were out to lunch, like outside of the athletic department and the offices on campus. And it was a whole different atmosphere and a whole different dynamic where she was able to talk with him and talk about what things that she wanted, what things that she needed, and just talk about the season ahead. And I'm wondering from your perspective, is it important for you to be able to do some of those team building components early in the season or like even before the season starts so that you can answer that ultimate question, which you talked about when you were just walking us through all that, was how do you get them to be the way that they are off the softball field on the softball field?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's the biggest thing is that like it all comes back for me comes back to trust. Like you can't just get trust automatically. You got to earn that trust, and it takes time. It takes time to earn that trust. They're not going to trust you right away. You're not going to trust them right away. So that's something that kind of needs to develop. When we talk about that a lot with them, you got to earn it. It takes a while to get their trust, and it also is very easy to lose the trust. So we talk about how we're going to build that up and how we're going to maintain that between player to player, coach to coach, and within the whole team, and get them to understand that we're there for them and we're going to do what it takes on the field and off the field. I think that's one of the biggest things with being a college coach, which really I love the competition. I love the games, but at the same time, I love dealing with these student athletes and what they're doing off the field and their jobs that they're getting after, attending their weddings. My players from career are now having babies and just seeing their whole lives. It's just really cool to kind of see what they're doing, but it has nothing to do with softball. And if you ask some kids too about, their careers, they're going to remember the most memories are like their bus rides and their hotels and the airplanes, airports, and fun stuff they did together. Not a lot of it is actually between the lines. So it's just kind of cool to know, like, this is what's impacting them. The only way they're going to run through a wall for you is if they know you do the same for them.
Hey everyone, Christine here from Sweat with Stodds, one of this show's sponsors. The Dynamic Leaders podcast is here to help you be a better leader, and the best leaders take care of themselves both mentally and physically. I'm here to help on the physical side by making fitness accessible to everyone. As a certified personal trainer with years of experience coaching fitness classes, I've designed programs that can be followed at home and in the gym. These are intelligently structured programs, giving you a plan to follow to help you be successful. Build strength with my Get Strong at Home program, get quick results with Hit at Home 1 or 2, or work on your health outside of fitness with my Healthy Habits program. As a listener, you can get these programs at a discounted rate by entering code DYNAMIC at checkout. That's DYNAMIC at checkout. So head on over to sweatwithstods.com, that's sweat with STODDS.com, to take the next step toward achieving your health and fitness goals today.
We've talked a lot about what you do with your student athletes when they get onto campus, and I'd love to dive a little bit more into the recruiting aspect, because you mentioned earlier a little bit about the challenges of just how the softball world is different than it was when you were going through it. So just from a honest perspective, it's going to be hard for you to connect because you didn't experience it yourself. So when it comes to being able to make those connections in a way that may be different than it was when you were going through it, do you rely on some of your younger assistants in those moments to help you through whatever it is? Like if you're trying to connect with somebody and you can't figure out what it is that they really want, or you're traveling to find all these different players, like how different is it actually, and how much do you have to rely on some of your younger assistants to help you through that?
You really do. We use a lot of our players, and I even think even when I first started, I think the players are the ones that win the recruiting battle for you. Like we're going to kind of evaluate the talent and kind of go after the kids. But I think as far as getting kids to commit or getting kids to come, and a lot of them will say, oh, it's the coach, it's the school. But I really believe it's the players. And if our girls can get out and meet them, we have everybody come to campus for campus visits. And it's really important for me to get them to meet our players, meet all the different, one from each class if it's possible. You want them to get to know the players and the team, because that's who they're going to be hanging out with most of the time. We try to say, hey, you're going to have other friends on campus, but we all know you're pretty much with your team 24 hours a day the whole year. Those people you're going to relate with, people you're going to get along with. So we rely on our players a lot to say, hey, is this kid going to fit our culture? Is she going to fit in with what we do every day? And I try to obviously as a coach evaluate that, get to know the recruits. And I think, oh yeah, this is going to be a good fit. But there's been times where we've been wrong, where the players come back and say, you know what, coach, no, she's not going to fit in with this team. And then we kind of have to make a tough decision. Like, all right, do we offer this kid, or do we take the opinion of our student athletes? And more than that, we're going to go with our student athletes' opinions.
And again, what you just walked us through goes back to what you said a few minutes earlier with the trust. Like, how do you think it's common that other programs operate in that way, where they rely on their current players for their opinions on incoming players or potential players and teammates?
I think it's, and I have a lot of my good friends are in coaching, a lot of my coaching colleagues, and I think everybody's different. Everybody's different on what they're going to bring into the program and how they do it. I think some coaches really want to make that call themselves, and they want to be the one that makes the offer and based on their opinions of it. So I think that, and they've had success with that. I've just had success with bringing in kids, because then when it comes back to it, like even our players know that too. Like when they were recruited, like we do a lot, we'll do camps, and our girls will work the camps, and so they kind of get to meet them on that aspect of it as well, not just obviously on the visits. And then they're there as freshmen. Say, hey, remember how you guys felt to be, you were getting looked at, how you felt to be a recruit. So this is kind of how you're going to treat them and how they're going to treat you. And so I think a lot of them get that, like I said, the trust thing, that they know that we're bringing in kids that they got to spend 4 years with. And so they're usually pretty honest. And like I said, my assistants are better than me at it for sure. They're younger, they've played, they know what these kids are going to have to go through. So we do look at their social medias. We see what they're, I want kids that are all about softball. Because it is, when you get here, it's all softball. Obviously, you're going to have your academics, that's going to come first, and they're going to do their community service, and they're going to do something they need to do off the field. But pretty much, if you don't like to play softball all day, every day, we're going to go out and get somebody that does. So it does, go on, we go social medias and their Twitters, and I'm not as good as it as my assistants are, and even our players, but you kind of look at it and see, like, do they have any posts that are related to softball, or is everything about going to the beach in the summertime? For me, that's kind of a flag. I'm like, it's great. I love, my daughter loves going to the beach, going swimming, but I wouldn't recruit her to play softball, So there are things now, and I think it does make it harder as a recruit. You really do got to watch everything that you're doing, because it's sad that we can see their lives without them even knowing we're seeing it. So it is interesting. And how they treat their parents. I think it's another big thing for me. Is I'm big on character, and we go to these games, and these kids, and I have 3 of my own kids, so I get it. My kids are rude to me sometimes, and I get where they're coming from, but it's sometimes you kind of watch these kids, and if they're constantly, one of the big things is if they're yelling at their parents in the stands, or if the parents are yelling at them, or if you're carrying their bags for them, constantly bringing them drinks, bringing them water, and you're like, I like to see some independency there, these kids that are going to kind of play, they're going to treat their parents really well, because if they don't treat their parents well, they're probably not going to treat you very well.
Yeah, that's a great point, and something I've heard multiple coaches talk about. So a couple of things with your culture that I heard you say there. You're looking for girls that love softball and want to just be all involved in that. You're looking for girls that respect their parents or respect their elders in general and aren't as dependent on them as sadly as we see some kids in society these days. What other aspects are there that you're looking for? So you mentioned a few there. Is there anything else that you left out that says?
I think to go along with them, and kind of, I guess, obvious thing is just great teammates. I think that being a great teammate is huge. Like I tell a story. I think when I took the job at Villanova, I was coming in, and there was a class that was incoming class that was coming in, and one of the girls actually sent me a video of her future teammate. They were both seniors in high school. They were playing travel ball, and they were going to be freshmen that year. I didn't know either of them. The previous coach recruited them, obviously contacted them, talked to them. We kind of formed a relationship. And one of the girls actually sent me a video of her teammate hitting a home run. And I just thought it was so cool because it wasn't about her, it was about her teammate. And to me, I was like, wow, this is great. We get a kid that really gets it and understands it. And a lot of these kids will send it of themselves, but nobody had sent me one of somebody else before. So it was really cool. So I kind of knew from that day, she's sending me this video of somebody else hitting a home run, who's going to be her future teammate. I think this group is really going to click. And they're sophomores now, and they're probably one of the tightest classes we've had. And I think it kind of goes back to them being just really good teammates and looking out for each other. And it was really cool that she would send that to me.
So it seems to me, and please tell me if I'm wrong, but just from listening to you talk about all this, that you don't really have as much room to coach these players when they come to campus. What you're looking for, you almost in a way want it already to be a part of their dynamic, be a part of who they are. Maybe they need a little bit of coaching and refining here and there, but you can't, I guess for lack of a better phrase, you're not looking for projects per se, correct?
Absolutely. Yep. No, we're looking, like I said, that's what the thing is. I think it's like you said, it's good and bad about being a college coach. It's like we get them, it's kind of, you get what they already got, but I mean, the positive is that you can pick that. You kind of hopefully you can pick that out. Like you said, the negative is no, we're not real. Once they get here, I think it's kind of hard to change somebody's character. If they're not good teammates, if they're not good people, you're not going to fix that. You're going to have to get that. So that's why we focus on that. I think a lot of the recruiting, obviously talent, that's a given. But I think that next step is like, who's going to be fun to be around? Who's going to be a great teammate? Who's going to play a great role? Who's going to be that kid still cheering on the bench for the girl that plays their position? And there's a lot of really tough things, and they know that coming in, but it's like, I want to be part of this program, and it's lifelong, and these girls are amazing friends, and it's gone on way before I was even here at Villanova. I played so the coach that retired, Marie DiBernardi, she was my coach. So she was here for 34 years, and I took over. So it's kind of cool because I still know, obviously, the alumni that I played with. The program kind of just keeps rolling right along, which has been awesome. We went out to San Diego about 2 weeks ago for our spring break, and I got to meet a lot of the alumni that had played over the last 10 years. And it was just cool to see the kind of people that Maria brought in, and they're just great people, working really hard, really successful, great teammates, great supporters. And it was no surprise to me because I knew that's kind of what Maria went after, and she went after really good kids.
Now, when push comes to shove, or you're on that pendulum swing and you're trying to determine whether a player is ultimately going to fit into your culture, does the character always outweigh the talent or the skill level of somebody that you're looking at?
Absolutely. And that would go back, I think, to when you asked about mistakes. That would be a mistake as a young coach. If you would have asked me this, and I talk about it with my husband all the time, it's funny, he's like, you would have taken her years ago. You would have that. When I was first coaching, I didn't care what kind of person. I thought, oh man, she can hit home runs. She's going to strike every batter out. Like, she's the greatest athlete I've ever seen. And I just didn't know that you needed to look at those different things until you've had some problems with your coach. You go, wow, I could have avoided that because I knew that this kid was going to be this or that. And so that is one of the young mistakes I think that I had made is, you want to take a chance on some of these kids, but your gut tells you, I don't know, even from like an academic standpoint, you go, well, I'm going to take this kid. I don't think academically she can handle it here, but she's a really good player. It always bites you in the butt because, you know what, they're over their head. They can't handle it. And you kind of knew that going in. And I think as a young coach, you're looking at just talent because you think that's what's going to win you games, but it doesn't. The talent isn't winning you games. I think our best teams weren't our most talented teams. Our best teams are the teams that got along together. And again, they have talent, absolutely. But the ones that actually would battle for each other and go to war, those are the ones that are going to win championships.
So cool. And I know there is so much more that goes into being a coach as well. And we've touched on a few of those aspects in our conversation today. But if there's somebody who's listening and they're aspiring to be a head coach, whether they've gotten into coaching already or they're an assistant and they're looking to climb that ladder to the head coaching position, can you just tell us a little bit more about what the day in, day out responsibilities of your job entail if somebody's trying to determine, is this something I really want to do? Or maybe they got scared away already by all that recruiting talk.
No, absolutely. I try to push all my kids to do that. And actually my assistant coach now, Gabby Ludi, so she was one of my players and she was actually pre-med, going to be a doctor at Fordham. And now she coaches with me. So I thought her parents might kill me when we were, I think it was like her junior year or so when she started, she was doing her biology classes, but she just really took a knack to coaching. And I thought, yeah, why don't you try coaching? And then it hit me like, oh no, like maybe not. Doctor or coach. But, and she's still coaching to this day, which is funny because I just think that it's something that you have to be really passionate about. You have to really enjoy it. You're not going to get paid as much as, like I said, a lawyer, a doctor, or a business person. But I think there is so many rewards and so many things that it has taught me and taught me how to be a better mother, how to be a better wife. It's just been great, the ins and outs of it. And obviously you need to have a lot of support. And I wouldn't be here without the people around me. Obviously my husband, the springtime for him is pretty crazy with our 3 kids. And he kind of takes every weekend and kind of lets me do my thing. So I'm really appreciative to have somebody like him. So you're going to have a big support system. My parents, my brother, my husband, you'll have to have somebody supporting you. There's so many ups and there's so many downs. So that's one of the other things to take note of, that you got to be able to handle those waves. But I definitely think the rewards way outweigh the risks.
So basically it's got to be one of those jobs you're all in for. You can't just kind of sit behind your computer and coast along.
No, and it is. It really, that's why I think it doesn't feel like a job. Like it doesn't end, which I like about it. But like, no, you're working 24 hours a day. Like we don't know what weekends are. Like we don't know what off time is. Like you're really working 24 hours a day. It's something that's always going in my head, or always something going on with softball, planning practice, planning scheduling, doing your hotels, doing your everything you do, dealing with the student athletes on a daily basis. You have 20 girls that you're constantly trying to stay in contact with and make sure they're at their best academically, athletically, they're getting jobs, they're in healthy relationships. You're just really always involved. And I think that's one of the things. It's not a part-time thing. Either you're all in or it'll eat you up real fast.
I think sometimes it can be counterproductive to look too far ahead and miss out on what's happening here in the present. But you leave Fordham after 17 seasons to come home, if you will, and take over this program. Did you have some type of vision? Like what was the reasoning behind taking that leap and taking that next step? Like what are the things that you're hoping to accomplish now that you're at Villanova?
One of the biggest things was obviously family related. This is a family move, bringing our family back here. My husband also is a Villanova grad, so that's where we met. We came back here. We have our 3 children. My 2 boys are huge into basketball, so obviously those national championships helped ease the move a little bit. They've always been Villanova fans, but they were not thrilled to move. They did not want to move. Obviously they were in New York their whole life, and we're going to move to Philly. That was not easy at all. We knew it wasn't going to be easy. We knew it was going to be transition, but I think the risk to me was just the reward was so much better than the risks. And I talked to a lot of people before making the move, and obviously one of them, Mark Jackson, who's our athletic director. He was the main key ingredient why we took this move. Talking to him and what his vision was for our program got me excited. And I'm excited a lot. So for him to get me more excited than I normally am was just something where I knew in my heart, like this is a spot to go. Like this guy is really passionate. He's invested. He has a vision. We just aligned on all the same pages. And I thought, you know what? It was a challenge. It's definitely a challenge. Got me out of my comfort zone. Like I said, winning at Fordham, and we were kind of rolling. Everything was perfect there, and I loved my time at Fordham. So I didn't leave because something wasn't right. It just, for me, it felt like, okay, you know what? I had 17 years here. We had won 7 in a row. We've gone to the NCAAs every year. And so I think I was almost ready for a new challenge in life and a new move. And my kids were at that age. So my son we had 7th, 8th grade, and 4th grade. And it was like, if we're going to move, now's the time to do it. I didn't want to move when they got to high school, and I wasn't sure if I was going to be in New York forever. So that was more kind of the timing. And, Mark Jackson convinced me that this was going to be a place to come. And then kind of seeing my alma mater, I really, really want that championship. And they haven't won. We haven't won a championship here in the Big East. And that's kind of what the team's goals is, and we really want that. And I saw that as a challenge, and I definitely think that they can do it.
So cool, and definitely going to be rooting for you from the sidelines, although we have to wait this season into next season now with the coronavirus and everything. But when we talk about coaching and we talk about you being a woman in sports, is it important to you to be visible and to be vocal for the next generation of women, to have somebody to look up to as being a role model?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's because I think that's kind of what worked for me. I was able to see, these women taking these positions and just seeing the success and their ability to be able to do that. And it's definitely been big for me to be able to say, like, hey, we're women, we're strong, we're empowered, we can do a lot of cool, crazy, awesome things. And I think that's helped a ton. And even to see some of my former players, one player in particular is Kayla Lombardo. She played for me at Fordham, and she's huge into sports, and now she's going and she's big into the women empowerment, and she now works for Softball America, and she writes, and she's on Twitter, and I'm just so proud of see what she does every day. And that's like her big thing is like, we're going to elevate this to the next level. And just to see like, hey, I had some impact of that. She played for me. We learned from each other, and to see how she's carrying that movement along is just cool, because it says to me like, hey, like these girls are going to go on and they're going to do some really big things. And she's one of the people that I kind of point to all the time to say, hey, she really took it by the wings and is running with it.
Bridget, if people want to follow along with you or the program, where can we find you on social media or the internet?
So definitely VU Softball's our Twitter, and then I have my own, which is just Bridget Orchard. I'm not even sure what my Bridget Orchard on Twitter. I don't know what the actual. This is where I show that I'm old. I don't know what the tag is. I don't know how to find me. I think I just Google things. If on Twitter you search Bridget Orchard, I will pop up. And I tried to post. So I'm on there, obviously via our website, Villanova.com. We keep up with all the stories that are going on and everything we're able to do. And we hope to get some more fans out there, some more supporters.
Awesome. I will find that information and throw it into the show notes. So everyone, easy reference, if they're listening, they want to follow along, we'll throw that right in there. And Bridget, before I let you go, the show is called Dynamic Leaders, and you have showcased today just how dynamic of a leader you are. And I'm sure the girls that you get to coach on that softball program believe in you and the energy that you bring. It's really been shown, I think, in a great way in this conversation. But I like to give my guests an opportunity to shout out somebody who's been influential from either a leadership perspective or just in general in their own life. Do you have somebody that you want to give a quick shout out to today?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously it's going to seem like, hey, I'm just doing this because he's my boss. But Mark Jackson, when you said dynamic leader, and you mentioned it before we talked, and if somebody's dynamic leader, it's Mark Jackson. And he's our athletic director here at Villanova, but he always talks about his 4 F's. Like I said before, he's the reason we got here. But he talks about his family, fun, faith, friendship, I think it is. But it's all those cool things that he brings. He's just so dynamic, but he competes for us like no other, especially when you talk about the women's sports. Like, he has a daughter that plays softball. He has 4 kids. So he has 2 daughters. One that's playing softball. She's going to Princeton next year to play softball. His wife played softball. So he's into it. He comes to our games. He sits in our dugout. He traveled to Florida with us. So it's just somebody that when I say like, okay, this guy's leading us, he's not leading just by saying do this or do that. It kind of reminds me when you talked by your other guest you had on the podcast, went to lunch with their boss, and Mark makes us feel like that all the time. And it's not just me as a softball coach, but I think all the other coaches in the department and everybody he works with, he makes everybody feel like they're really important. And obviously, I know he has a million other things going on, so it's just kind of cool to me to see somebody that has so much going on. He was just named vice president of the university as well. So you think like, here's this big time guy, the vice president, but he's going to text you. He's going to, he'll invite you over to his house. He just does things that I think we were out recruiting. Like I said, his daughter Grace plays, and she plays on a local travel team, the PA Chaos, and she's being recruited. And he's there, and introduced to somebody, and they're like, "Wow, he's just like a regular dad." And he was just laughing because like, that's what he is. He is a regular dad. So it's just kind of cool because he has these huge titles and has accomplished so much, but yet he's just so down to earth. And it's just been fun being here, working for him and working with him. It's really great.
That is an awesome shout out, and just a quick side note of how important it is to build a trusting relationship with your boss. So definitely going to make things a lot easier and a lot more enjoyable. And it sounds like you've achieved both of those. So, but
absolutely. It's been awesome.
Awesome. Well, Bridget, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today and share all your expertise. I know I've learned a lot, and I know people are going to take a lot from this, but can't thank you enough for taking the time to hop on the show.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me.